Welcome back to BullyBall, a 49er podcast. Today, we have our pregame preview of the San Francisco 49ers versus the Chicago Bears. Season opener tomorrow in Chicago. Going to be a little rainy, going to have some weather, but we're going to dive right into it. Stay tuned.
Tony Montana, Tony Montana, Tony Montana, check up on my ear. Tony Montana, Tony Montana, Tony Montana, I'm about to cut the...
All right, welcome back to BullyBall, a 49er podcast. You have me, Joseph, Alex, and we are going to have a guest, a podcaster and writer for the Chicago Bears joining us in a few minutes. So we're going to be able to ask all the questions that we have about this Bears team, the coaching staff, the scheme, everything of the above. So how you doing today?
Good. I'm excited for this episode. I'm very excited. It's week one of the NFL season, man. It feels like it took forever. I think it's been over 200 days, probably even more for the Niners, a little bit more because I think it was 200 days since the Super Bowl. So I'm ready. Week one, there's a lot of questions about the Niners, I feel like, mainly with Trey Lance, of course. What Trey Lance are we going to get? Same could be said with the Bears because the Bears, you have Justin Fields over there. Their offensive line, we'll break that down as well. But it'll be a battle of the young quarterbacks. It'll be fun to see. Playing in a historic field like Soldier Field in Chicago, that's going to be fun. Curious to see the fan turnout out there because what I've been seeing on Twitter, it's looking like they're having a good bunch of people that are going to go down there. So we'll see if it's like last year when they were taking over stadiums. It'll definitely be a fun one for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to go, so I'm trying to go to one game before I leave to Germany in a couple months. And the three prospective games were the Bears season opener, Atlanta, and the Panthers in North Carolina. So number one was the Bears. I wanted to go to Chicago, but those tickets, insane. Like $200 for nosebleeds, and I was like, yeah, no, I'm not making it out. They didn't just win the Super Bowl or something, so I don't know why they charging so much for those tickets. So I'm hoping, the Panthers or Atlanta lose a couple games, lower the price for me. I'm moving. I need cheap tickets.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of Niner fans are already out there as well because the San Francisco Giants, the baseball team, is also playing the Chicago Cubs this weekend. I think they're playing today, and then obviously Niners playing tomorrow. So I'm expecting a pretty decent turnout with the fans, and I think, of course, that always helps a lot because Niner fans travel well, especially as of late. If you can get a young quarterback going on a silent count or something like that, could go a long way. You know what I mean? Same goes for Trey Lance because I'm sure the Bears fans are going to be loud and getting crazy too because, both of these teams are kind of on the upward trajectory with their young quarterbacks, I would say. I think the Niners are a little bit more ready this season, but I think the Bears are building the right thing as well. And we'll obviously talk to our guest about that too. So that should be fun.
Yeah, and you know how it is every year. There's always a team that's like, maybe they're not good, but they're not bad, and then they surprise people and they end up winning like 8, 9, 10 games. Last year, I think that would have been the Eagles. They were on the verge, had a good young QB, some decent talent. Somehow they snuck into the playoffs. So
yeah. Also, before our guest comes on, just to break down some injury news for the Niners, Dan Brunskill is going to be out for this game, which I think was kind of expected. He's dealing with a hamstring injury, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Hamstring.
So he'll be out. He's already declared out, not doubtful or anything. He's out for sure. So that'll be a depth piece that the Niners are missing this game for sure. And then a big one that came out later in the week was tight end George Kittle. He's dealing with a growing injury. He hasn't practiced at all. I know Shanahan was saying that he was hopeful that he was going to practice yesterday, but he didn't practice. So that's concerning. He is officially listed as questionable right now, which I guess is better hypothetically because he's not doubtful, he's questionable, but still, that's going to be a big loss because obviously we all know George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league, whether it's blocking or receiving, one of the best tight ends in the league for sure. So that's going to be a big loss, especially for a young Trey Lance. What are your thoughts on the George Kittle injury?
Yeah, and that's I think it's a lot bigger than people understand. The Bears team isn't bad on the defensive line. They got Robert Quinn. I believe he was an All-Pro last year.
Yeah.
18 and a half sacks. And on the other side, they have, I believe it's Al-Kareem Muhammad, something like that, from the Colts. He had 6 sacks last year. And we know the 49ers like to have George Kittle stay in and kind of help pass protect sometimes. So even just it's going to hurt a little bit. You have Mike McGlinchey, hasn't got many reps this offseason because of the injuries and just keep reoccurring. So it's going to hurt in the run game. It's going to hurt in the pass game, and just having that leader out because I really don't think he's going to play. It's going to affect the offense a lot.
Yeah, and they still have, obviously, even behind that D line, Roquan Smith, who's one of the best off ball linebackers in the league. So that's going to be a factor because Kittle can really put the pressure on him from a receiving side. I think George Kittle and Roquan Smith matchup would favor the Niners personally. So now you're going to have that be who even is going to be the second tight end? Is it going to be Charlie
Dwelly.
Warner, Ross Dwelly, or is it going to be Croft?
I think it'll be Ross Dwelly.
Yeah. So whoever it is, obviously it's a gigantic step down from George Kittle. No disrespect to those guys behind him, but like we said, George Kittle is one of the best tight ends in the league. So that's something that's going to be concerning. Hopefully, if he's not 100%, would you still want him, if he can get out there, to go play, or would you just say, wait until you're good 100%?
No, I wouldn't play him this week. Groin injury, that's one of those ones that's going to lag, and, it's going to hold him back the whole year. And I was reading an article the other day, and they were saying the way it was affecting him is that he isn't able to reach top speed with this groin injury. Don't play the guy. You know what I mean? Let him get healthy, give him a week, 2 weeks, whatever it takes. Once he's completely healthy, then bring him in because you don't want that injury holding him back all season.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so we have our guest hopping on now. Welcome on Lester Wiltfong Jr. At Wiltfong Jr. on Twitter. How's it going today, sir?
Doing good, guys. How y'all doing?
Doing good. Would you mind giving our guests, a breakdown introduction of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, I'm editor-in-chief over at Windy City Gridiron, one of the SB Nation sites that covers the NFL. Also got a couple podcasts on the WCG channel. T Formation Conversation. I also co-host Bear and Balanced. We got a video channel as well called Second City Gridiron. So we're just trying to give our fans all the Bears content they can take.
Yes, sir. Perfect. And we have as a 49er podcast, us and our fans, we know pretty much everything about the 49ers. We comb through the roster, know pretty much everybody. We don't know much about the Bears besides, your key players, Justin Fields, Roquan Smith. Are there any breakout players on this team that you could see, this game kind of being that coming out party for them for this season?
Well, there's a few Bears that are really looking forward to getting the season started. Wideout Darnell Mooney, he's had a nice year last year. Him and Justin Fields have a really good connection. He's more of a a deep ball guy because of his 4.4 speed, but he's just such a crisp route runner. Just a really good connection with Fields, and he's excited. He's talked about how he's looking to kind of get out in the field and kind of show the doubters wrong, as they say. And then of course, tight end Cole Kmet, he's coming off a nice year as well, but he's underrated by a lot of fans, Bears fans as well. But he had 60 catches last year as a second-year tight end. I think he's still just 23 years old. He was drafted fairly young, so I think that this could be a big year for him. And then on the defensive side, cornerback Jalen Johnson, another guy that's kind of talked a lot about how he wanted to get out there and kind of prove people wrong. This will be his third season. He's improved each year in the league, and he's looking to establish himself as one of the better corners in the game.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely. Like you said, you mentioned Cole Kmet. There's been a lot of hype around him this year about a breakout season, possibly, especially in the fantasy realm of NFL. So what are your expectations for him this game? The Niners have one of the more athletic linebacker cores in the NFL for sure. So what would be your expectations for him this game?
I think I actually put a little money on him going over at this prop. I think it's like 34 yards. I just think the way he's been used in the offense, the way tight ends have traditionally been used in this style of Shanahan offense, they're going to scheme some looks for him. And we kind of saw that in preseason. I think Justin Fields, I talked about the connection he has with Darnell Mooney. He has that with Kmet too. I mean, him and Kmet had a pretty good preseason. They look good in training camp. All through training camp, the Bears featured, Kmet quite a bit. So I mean, I'm not expecting a Travis Kelce jump from him at all. I mean, that's not what I'm saying here, or George Kittle. That's just not who he is. But he had 60 catches last year, 600 yards, no touchdowns. With Jimmy Graham, he's no longer in Chicago. Some of those red zone chances would go to Kmet. I can't see him having zero catches for touchdowns this season. So from a fantasy standpoint, yeah, I think Kmet could break out as far as the tight end goes, because if you're drafting tight ends, I mean, there's those few guys on top, and then there's a bunch of guys in the middle. I think Kmet could be one of those better guys in the middle.
I agree. You talk about Darnell Mooney. I was watching a couple of Bears podcasts earlier in the week, and they were kind of saying, they weren't comparing him to the player, but they were saying the Bears offense could look to use him the way that the Packers use Devontae Adams, kind of as that go-to guy. That's who we're going to center our offense around. Is that how you kind of see it as well?
I think if you look at the way the roster is constructed for the Bears, he's really the only established receiver they have right now. I mean, he was their most targeted guy last year. And then behind him, it's Equinemius St. Brown, who maybe has 30 catches in his career. He's probably starting at the X. Byron Pringle came over from the Chiefs, who had a nice year last year in KC, but he hasn't practiced for the last month with a quad injury. He's back now, so we'll kind of see how they kind of mix him in. I think he'll be the slot guy, and then it's Dante Pettis. It's a bunch of guys that kind of are trying to really get their career back on track. So I think if Darnell Mooney can show that he can be that guy, and through 2 years they have. I mean, they move him around the offense quite a bit. Like I said, he was their top targeted guy last year. They trust his route running. He has pretty good hands, and I mentioned his speed. So if you can kind of use him as that guy to kind of play the rest of the receiving core off of, I think that's what the Bears will do.
Awesome.
It's interesting as well. You mentioned Dante Pettis, former 49er, second-round pick. A lot of Niner fans know him. I don't know if they like him or not, but
probably not.
What are your expectations for him? Because I know Velus Jones is going to be out this game, I believe.
Yeah.
Should we expect to see Dante Pettis returning punts and kicks? Because that's what, coming out of college, he was the most. I think he had the most return yards in all of college football history or something like that. So can we expect to see him returning punts and kickoffs this game?
I think with Jones out for sure, I think Pettis, in the preseason anyway, he did return the punt. So I think he'll be the Bears' top punt returner. As far as kickoffs go, I think the Bears may go with a different direction. They have Khalil Herbert, backup running back, who did it last year for them. Treston Ebner is a rookie running back who did a little bit of that in the preseason as well. So I think they may put one of their tailbacks at kick return. But I think it'll be Pettis there in the punt return game. Then as far as offensive reps, I think with Jones out, I know the Bears, he wasn't going to start for them, but they had some packages in mind for Velus Jones. You know, he's got great speed. He's a physical player. They wanted to get him the ball. So with that not being an option for the Bears this week, you may see some more reps for Pettis.
No, definitely. That's going to
That's
be an interesting
interesting.
one.
And you know, speaking on, you know, the packages and stuff like that, you obviously know the Bears like weaknesses better than us. So if you were the 49ers, how would you attack the Bears on offense and on defense?
I mean, their offensive line. I mean, you have to go at those guys. It's I have hopes that they can come together at some point, but you know, right now they're still not sure who they're going to start. I'm sure they know. I mean, they haven't announced it. Lucas Patrick broke his thumb. He was signed to be the Bears center. He probably can't snap the ball. He hadn't snapped it during practice, so he may end up starting at right guard, which moves Tevin Jenkins to the bench. Tevin Jenkins had just established himself as the Bears right guard, so you know, you kind of got a mix up there. You got a rookie left tackle in Braxton Jones, 5th-round pick. A former 5th-round pick in Larry Borum on the right side from last year. So you know there's some young inconsistent guys on that Bears front. So you know, I mean, I would attack them with some stunts. You know, I would test them to see how they react to that. I would blitz them every now and again, but you know, you got to understand, you know, Justin Fields and this style of offense, you know, they're going to try and run the ball. They're going to try and establish play action, bootlegs. So there should be a lot of moving pockets. So, but again, man, it's that O line for the Bears. That's going to be their Achilles heel all season until they really get things established. But I think if they're going to have one chance to really get after them, it's going to be this week 1.
Yeah. Speaking of Luke Getsy and kind of the scheme that he's going to be running, you know, he's a kind of a Mike LaFleur disciple coming from the Packers as their, like, I think receivers, quarterbacks coach, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, historically in that system, the quarterbacks kind of know what they're going to do in the offense. They're not really going to make too many off-schedule plays. With Justin Fields, one of the most athletic quarterbacks in the league for sure. You know, the Niners saw that last year with that crazy run that he had.
Yeah.
Are we going to see more running out of Justin Fields? You know, are they going to do like some RPO stuff, or is he kind of going to stick in the pocket? Because the Niners have had trouble in the past containing athletic quarterbacks, you know, like the Lamar Jacksons, Justin Fields last year, Kyler Murray's. They've had trouble. So what should we expect out of Justin Fields?
You know, we didn't see a lot of designed runs from him in preseason. So it's kind of hard to say if that's going to be part of the game plan for the Bears going forward. But the RPO should be there. You mentioned Luke Getsy before his time in Green Bay. He also spent some time in college, I believe, with Joe Moorhead, who has a lot of stuff with the spread concepts, the RPO concept. So if he brings some of that with him, which, you know, I'm assuming he does, and he did see some of that stuff in training camp, you know, I think the RPOs should be a big part of his game because, like you said, he's a 4.4 speed guy. He's a physical player. You know, if you can stress the defense that way, you know, it might help open up a lot of other things for the offense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I personally was one of the ones that wanted the 49ers to take Justin Fields, number 3 overall. So how have you seen him kind of progress from last year through this preseason?
I mean, it looks like he knew he had to work on his mechanics. I mean, that was a little sloppy last year. Part of that is the offense around him. He was kind of, you know, thrown in there with not much of a plan from last head coach Matt Nagy. I mean, they had a plan. It just wasn't a very well executed plan. So, but as far as Justin Fields go, he talked about how he was working on his footwork, and that's something that Luke Getsy fixed right away because it's a different footwork in this style of offense. Like I said, a lot of the bootlegs, a lot of the rollouts, you have to set up differently. So that's something they worked on. And then he had, I think, 12 fumbles last year. Part of that is just because he kind of held the ball a little too low. So they really worked on, you know, tightening up his delivery. And he's always had a wonky kind of delivery. It's not a classic delivery, but the ball gets to where it's got to go. So you don't really want to change that. But just the fact that they're having him hold the ball a little higher, that speeds the delivery up. Plus, it helps protect the ball a little bit. So those are a couple things he worked on this offseason. And again, it's the processing. You know, last year he was a bit slow to kind of read things. Again, I hate going back to the offense last year, but it was a mess, you know, last season.
Yeah.
So he's in a scheme now that they're truly tailoring the whole thing to him. You know, when they brought Luke Getsy in and they made the hire for the new coaching staff, they said we're going to build the offense around Justin Fields' skill set. that's exactly what they've done. So, I'm excited to see it. I mean, I'm not expecting a huge playoff push for this team, but just having a actual offensive scheme in place, I can have a chance to watch my favorite young players grow in this offense.
Yeah,
Agreed.
definitely. Another big storyline this offseason was Roquan Smith, not really getting that contract extension that he wanted, and then he put in that trade request on social media. And then he also got voted a captain this year, which was interesting. Is he good to go? Are we going to see him playing on Sunday? And what should we expect out of him? Because like I said, obviously he's one of the best off-ball linebackers in the NFL for sure.
I mean, if he's healthy, I mean, I expect another, at least 150 tackles again. I mean, he's all over the place. I mean, he's a perfect fit for this scheme. I mean, he was fine, the last few years in the Bears 3-4 front, but he is truly a perfect fit for the weak side linebacker in this scheme. He'll be chasing, making plays. And it was a weird situation, man. I mean, he was a hold in, so he was there, he was engaged, he was going to the meetings, he just wasn't practicing. I think part of it had to do with he doesn't have an agent. That kind of makes the negotiations a little trickier because now you're dealing with the player directly. Some of the stuff that you may not want to have him know, like the stuff behind the scenes, the agent kind of can work on those. And there's no agent in this case. So he said everything's behind him. He'll wait to the end of the season. And I think that's probably the best thing for him. I know there was a nice offer on the table. He didn't like the way some of the de-escalators were worked into it. But, man, this guy's going to have a huge year. He's a great fit for the scheme. I expect him to get paid somehow, some way at some point.
Definitely.
Yeah, great player. Speaking on Roquan Smith, you guys have two rookies starting in the defensive backfield, correct? Kyler Gordon, I believe it is, and Jaquan Brisker.
Yeah.
So George Kittle, that was probably what the 49ers were going to look to kind of expose, your new safety to the NFL, but he's probably not going to play in this game. So
that's good news for Bears fans.
Yeah. So, having two rookies starting in the defensive backfield, does that worry you at all going into this season?
A little bit, but man, the Bears secondary last year was atrocious. I mean, they had so many problems last year, so many holes. They went through, I think, 4 or 5 different nickels. The guy starting opposite Jalen Johnson at the other cornerback was bad. They had Tayshawn Gibson was Tayshawn. Was it Gibson? I'm not even sure now. The safety.
Yeah.
49er.
Yeah, I mean, they cycle through those guys. Since Adrian Amos left as a free agent, they cycled through like 3 or 4 vets next to Eddie Jackson. This should be a good scheme for Eddie Jackson to kind of bounce back. But if they weren't so bad last year, I'd be more worried this year. But there'll be growing pains. But Kyler Gordon, already in training camp, he was kind of earning reps as a guy that can kind of play outside and the nickel. So when I was there at camp, he was the starting guy outside. And then when the Bears went to nickel, they would kind of bump him in. They like his versatility. He's a physical player. The nickels are a key component to this defense. So the fact that the Bears already trust Kyler Gordon, a rookie, to kind of play 2 positions, I think that shows a lot about him. And then Brisker, man, this guy is just he's a force. I mean, he's a physical player, but the thing that people don't realize is he's so good in coverage as well. In the scheme the Bears run, he'll probably be the guy that's coming up a little more. He may play more in the box. Eddie Jackson, that's really not his thing. But Brisker can cover too. So if Kittle would have played, I think we would have saw a lot of Brisker against Kittle. I hope Kittle doesn't because he's an outstanding football player. So, but I'm excited to see these 2 rookies grow in the Bears defense.
Definitely building a super athletic defense.
Yeah.
You can see what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I mean, this is the philosophy. Coach Matt Eberflus, he has that Tampa 2 lineage. Lovie Smith, Rod Marinelli, Tony Dungy. This is what he believes in, and that's all about hustle. It's all about the turnovers and playing smart football, and he's been preaching it. And his defense, even in training camp, every time they would go to rapid tackle, there's a punch out happening. So, I mean, they're looking for turnovers on all plays. It's something the offense has to think about when they're playing against the Bears.
Yeah. Jaquan Brisker was a player that a lot of 49ers fans liked at number 63. but I think you guys got him a little bit before that.
Yeah.
So that was unfortunate because the 49ers definitely need some safety help. We brought over Tayshaun Gibson. He's on our practice squad. So
that's right. Okay. Yeah.
Revenge game of Tayshaun Gibson, possibly.
Wow.
But like you said, you guys have a lot of young players in your defensive backfield. So would you say that's an area that the 49ers offense could expose? Because I don't really see the Niners getting a lot of success in the run game just because we have a unexperienced O-line. And your guys' defensive line is pretty good. You have Robert Quinn. I saw you guys picked up a guy from the Colts who's pretty good as well, I believe.
Yeah.
A lot of other players that are underrated. And then we talked about Roquan Smith already. So would you say that the passing game is where the Niners should look on offense if they're going to want to move the ball and get some touchdowns?
I mean, I'll be honest. I think the Shanahan run game is just so beautiful to watch. I think even if there are some issues up front with you guys, I think they're still going to stick to the run. I think, the Bears through preseason, it's a different scheme than what they had the last couple of years. So, it's more of a scheme based on speed. It's shooting one gap. They have to be really gap disciplined. So I think that they may find some success running at them. The Bears brought in Justin Jones from the Chargers to be their 3-tech defensive tackle. I have high hopes for him. I think he has a chance to be pretty good, but we didn't see a lot from him in the preseason. Angelo Blackson's a guy who's kind of more of a journeyman type. You mentioned the guy off the edges. Yeah, Robert Quinn's pretty good as a pass rusher. Al-Qadim Muhammad, who they brought over from the Colts, he's pretty good against the run. So, I think it depends how they attack it. But again, it's going to be mirror images because they run similar offenses now with the Bears. I think the run game is gonna really hurt what the Bears want to do, and then those play actions. You really test those young defensive backs to kind of read their keys, and if they're not doing it, Trey Lance might have a pretty good game.
And with that said, we heard it's supposed to rain a little bit out there. You think that's going to affect the game conditions or anything like that?
Soldier Field has traditionally had a awful playing surface. This year they actually put in a brand new grass. I forget the name off the top of my head, but it's supposed to be one that holds up better in the weather. It's supposed to be a faster playing surface. I mean, the rain will affect a little bit, but we're talking about two teams that they want to run the ball as much as possible. So that kind of could play into both teams' hands. I think the Niners probably are a little better team overall. So I think if it helps any team more than the other, it probably helps you guys.
Yeah, the 49ers, they had a game against the Washington. I believe it was when they were still the Redskins in 2019. Awful game in the rain. So we'll see how it holds up.
Bermuda grass. I'm pretty sure that's what you guys installed.
That's it. Yeah, that was it. It was, they used to have Kentucky bluegrass, I think, and it's a different grass now. And I mean, there's actually some really cool articles about it where it's like the way the roots kind of set. It's a thicker root, so it kind of keeps the playing surface tighter. It's just I learned more about grass in the last week than I ever thought I would, but it was kind of cool to kind of see the stories because, like I said, Soldier Field has traditionally been awful playing surface. I mean, divots in there all over the place, just dead spots. And, I mean, this is one of the reasons why the Bears are looking to move to a different stadium in a couple of years.
Yeah. The Niners also dealt with the field condition problems early at Levi Stadium the first few years. I'm sure the Bears were aware. They were the opening game at Levi's, I believe, a few years ago.
Yeah.
Joe, do you have any questions before we get into some game predictions?
Yeah, one last question I had is, the Bears brought over former 49er special team coach Richard Hightower. He's had a good career. He had a good career with the 49ers, but last year the special teams was really, really bad. Besides what you saw in the Packers game in the playoffs, how has the special teams looked this year for the Bears?
I mean, through preseason, the special teams has really, really looked good. I mean, when you watch Hightower at training camp, that's an energetic dude. I mean, he's all over the place, yelling and screaming at his guys. And I mean, that's what you want from the guy that coaches the third phase. So, I mean, again, preseason we're talking here, but I've been good with it. I mean, the Bears have a pretty good kicker in Cairo Santos. They have a rookie punter in Trenton Gill who looked pretty good. They're redoing their coverage units, but in preseason, it's like I said, it's preseason, so it's practice. You're playing against guys that are they're probably no longer in the league, but they look pretty good. So I mean, I'm expecting them to be pretty decent this year.
That's good.
Before we jump into predictions, I kind of have like a fantasy question for you. Luke Getsy, we talked about him taking over. He's from the Shanahan scheme. That's probably what he's going to implement. At running back, the Shanahans have been known to alternate running backs. You don't really have a number one guy that's going to run the ball most of the game. They're going to try to switch. What has been Shanahan's like most known couple players was Devontae Freeman for the Falcons and Tevin Coleman. They split reps a lot. Kyle Shanahan is still doing that.
Yeah.
Two guys that you guys have, David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. I know a lot of people were kind of skeptical on David Montgomery from a fantasy perspective just because of that possible rotation. Do you think we're going to see that throughout the year, or is David Montgomery going to pretty much run the most of the rock most of the time?
I mean, that's what the Packers did last year too. I mean, they split carries with their guys. So I thought the Bears would do that, but watching the preseason, Khalil Herbert as a rookie last year, he struggled a little bit in pass pro, and that kind of showed up again during preseason. So I mean, if you can't pass protect as a tailback, you're not going to play a lot. And they're making an emphasis on protection this year, obviously. So David Montgomery is just such a good all-around football player. He's a guy that can get you 50 catches. He's obviously good as a runner. A lot of fans are worried about his top end speed, but he's fast enough. I mean, he could play the outside zone scheme well. He's not going to take it to distance because he doesn't have that kind of speed, but he can break off some chunk runs for you every now and again. So I think at some point, they're going to try and rotate guys in there, but that's on Herbert, man. If Herbert shows he doesn't have a good grasp of that, you kind of may see a little bit of Herbert along with the rookie Treston Ebner, who is a great receiver out of the backfield when he was at Baylor. He played some receiver. He played running back as well. So they like his versatility. So I think it's going to be Montgomery with the bulk of the carries. And then I think they may rotate Herbert and Ebner in a little bit as the backups.
Gotcha. Sounds good. So wrapping it up here, if you want to give a quick score prediction for week one.
Bears fans always hate me because I don't pick the Bears very often, but I mean, the Bears haven't been a very good team, the last few years. So I think it'll be a close game. I think the Bears are going to surprise a lot of people by how good they look, because they're a well-coached football team. I mean, the Niners are coming off a really good season. Yeah, the quarterback has some issues there. They're still kind of working through some of that, but I think overall they're just too good top to bottom. So I got it San Francisco 24, Bears, we'll call it 21.
That's the exact prediction I was going to give as well.
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
I'm going to say Niners 24, sticking with the same score there all around. Bears 13. I'm expecting a lot out of this Niners defense, adding Mooney Ward. I think they're going to, and then obviously the D-line, Nick Bosa, and all the other depth pieces we have. I think they're going to cause some fits.
Nick Bosa is so good, man. It's just
yeah, game changer.
Yeah.
And I think he's just going to keep getting better too. He's reworked his body each offseason to make himself so much better. It's crazy. The Bosas just have a different bloodline for sure.
Yeah.
So 24-13, that is my final score prediction. Niners being 1-0.
That works.
Did you have any questions for us? Any questions about the 49er team heading into this game?
Yeah, actually, I got a couple of that. That'd be cool. So George Kittle, like I said, he's listed as questionable. You guys mentioned he didn't practice all week. Some of the beat writers I read from you guys said that he's probably not playing for sure, but of course they gave him the questionable. You guys don't think he'll play?
So George Kittle, he's one of those guys that's a warrior.
Yeah.
He'll play injured every single week if you let him. So if it's up to him, I think he will play. But if it was me or the team, I would not let him play. Groin injury, you don't want that lingering all season. But we'll see.
Yeah. Shanahan also mentioned yesterday on a local radio talk show, saying that he hoped George Kittle would get some work in the red zone practice yesterday. And George Kittle didn't practice at all. So I think that's kind of telling, that he'll probably sit out.
Okay, and then my last question for you guys: do you guys believe in Trey Lance? Is he the guy?
I believe in Trey Lance. I think every single game he's played in so far, he has that one play where you're like, wow, this guy, he looks like an NFL quarterback. Now, of course, inaccuracies, inconsistencies, um, kind of like how you had mentioned with Justin Fields last year. He needs to work on his fundamentals, and he needs the reps.
Yeah.
The dude played one full year of college at the FCS level. He played quarterback in high school, but he was also a linebacker. So, all of his attention wasn't focused on quarterback. He needs probably 25 games worth of reps to be ready, to go. So I believe in him. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of ups and downs. I just hope the team doesn't give up on him and doesn't revert back to Jimmy Garoppolo at some point.
Yeah, definitely. Shoot, we might just mix it up and throw Jimmy G in there to get that. Jimmy G's from Chicago, played some of his better games out there, 2017, and then last year with the Debo Dash. It's a game that the Niners really focused on as a pivot for their season.
I've heard that by a lot of you guys. It's like, oh, it's terrible memory because that was such a great play from Debo, and it's just it was a game where most Bears fans thought they had because how good they started coming back, and that play was just was so heartbreaking from a Bears fan. But like you said, it did turn you guys' season around, and it really helped you guys get to the playoffs.
Without that play, Trey Lance was actually ready to go into the game at that moment. If that play never happened, we probably saw Trey Lance play out the rest of that season as a starter. Wow.
So
it's so weird how just one play kind of changes the direction of a franchise.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, we're excited. It's going to be a fun game, battle of young quarterbacks. Got a lot of questions that are going to be answered in week one. A lot of that are still going to be yet to be answered. So I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for hopping on with us. We appreciate it. And hopefully we might see you guys in the playoffs. That'd be crazy, huh?
I doubt it, but that would be kind of cool.
All righty.
Thanks,
for
guys.
Coming on.
Sure, anytime.
Send it back.